morning. On behalf of the board and staff of the Canadian Working Group on HIV and Rehabilitation, or QWIGR, I'd like to welcome you all very much to the celebration this morning of Elisse's life. My name is Steve Tattle, and I'm acting Executive Director of QWIGR, and I've had the pleasure of filling Elisse's very big shoes since she went on leave last December. However, Elisse and I have a relationship that precedes that. For about 20 years, I was part of the group that founded QWIGR with her back in 1998. So like many people here, I often say that at weddings and funerals, it's always a nice celebration because it brings together people's lives, disparate part of their lives, their colleagues, their friends, and their family. But I know many people, like myself in this room, would count themselves in more than one category. Today we get together to celebrate Elisse and to thank her for what she gave us, what she gave to her families, her friends, and her colleagues, and very importantly, what she contributed to the fight against HIV and AIDS. We all know pretty well that Elisse would not like this kind of recognition. A couple of weeks before Elisse passed away, I was in the hospital with her and I said, okay, Elisse, we want to do a memorial, so I want to know what you want. And she said, I want nothing. And I said, Elisse, you don't have a choice here. So within that, tell me what you want. And she was very clear that she wanted it to be downtown in the community that she lived and worked in. However, knowing all this, we tried to plan today in a manner which we believe would make Elisse happy. Firstly, we've brought together most of the most important people in her life. Given that it's summer and a high vacation period at the end of August, we know that everyone cannot be here. So you'll notice that this service is being recorded over there, and we'll make the video available as widely as we possibly can sometime next week. Another thing we did to plan for Elisse was this is happening in the morning, on a Saturday morning. As many of you know, Elisse was very much a morning person. I know it was not uncommon to get emails from her at 4:45 and 5 o'clock in the morning, which she got through before she was at the gym when the doors opened every morning, and she still no one ever beat her into the office. And also the 519. This location was chosen purposefully, as it played an important role in Elisse's life, as it's been the site for many community, advocacy, and political meetings she attended over the years. It's in the heart of the community in which she lived and which she worked. We have a number of people from all segments of Elisse's life who are going to share some stories about Elisse this morning. We also have, as you've seen, a PowerPoint presentation going up with pictures we've managed to collect over the last couple of weeks, which have Elisse from a very young age till the most recent pictures. And some of you may have noted, if you signed the guest book on the way in, one of the things her friend Ross found in her apartment was an elementary school report card that was in a little frame. So we have that back on the table, and I do note that for the 6 terms they show on there, there was an A in every single solitary thing. So Elisse always worked hard, pretty obviously. But this was not just math and history, this was citizenship and health habits and cooperation. Everything was an A. We'll also have an opportunity after the people we've asked to speak to have an open mic to allow people to come up and share about Elisse. We have a couple of pre-planned things in there, but generally what we really want is for people to come up and be able to share. So at this point, I'd like to ask our first speaker to come up. Our first speaker is Stephanie Nixon. Stephanie is a longtime both colleague and friend of Elisse's, and Stephanie's going to share on Elisse's many contributions.
Elisse's many contributions. Picture this. June 2010, Elisse and I are meeting up at a sunny downtown patio to discuss her latest idea for changing the world. Behind me, I hear the rattle of Elisse's bike, the flapping of plastic bags in her basket. It might rain later. She's on time, but apologizes for being late. She envelopes me in a big, authentic hug. And then, first things first, she asks how my 2 young boys are doing. I share an anecdote and show her a recent photo, and Elisse then becomes gripped by an all-over body force in response to how cute they are. She is physically overtaken by small shudders of delight at how happy she is for me. She grabs her fantastic black head of hair, a big, gorgeous smile stretching ear to ear, quaking with joy as she proclaims, "I can't stand it! They are so adorable! I can't stand it!" Now, this is both figurative and literal. She is actually having trouble standing. She begs for more, and I give it. More hilarious anecdotes about the rascals, more sweet photos, and she gobbles up each detail with a continued kind of ecstatic pain. And then, finally, once sated in her updated knowledge of my world, we can get down to work on that patio. To be fair to Elisse, my children are breathtakingly cute. But this scene exemplifies common threads woven throughout Elisse's many contributions in her professional career as well. Extraordinary empathy, deep caring of others, great kindness, and passion. Passion. These hardwired traits must have played out in the 1970s when Elisse taught English as a second language for the Toronto Board of Education, including in my own neighborhood, Parkdale. And in the first half of the 80s, when Elisse partnered on grassroots organizing with immigrant women in her role as coordinator of the Rexdale Women's Center. And for the next 7 years, into the 90s, when Elisse coordinated the Ontario Literacy Coalition, developing hundreds of literacy programs across the province. And then 5 more years at the Canadian AIDS Society, where Elisse led the charge on a national education project for people dually infected with HIV and tuberculosis. But all of that was before my time with Elisse, which officially began the spring of 1998. Picture this. I'm one of a couple dozen people invited by Health Canada to a mysterious meeting in Quebec City. Something was being started. In the room were government policymakers, pharmaceutical company reps, HIV activists, physicians, and a few people like me, rehabilitation providers. The idea, I soon learned, was that we were to launch a multi-sectoral collaboration, whatever that might mean, to invent a new field, HIV and rehabilitation, and to fund research in the area, drive policy, and change clinical practice across the country. Right, an ambitious plan, and it was clear who in the room held the power. Right behind them was Elisse, rarely speaking, but clearly absorbing, synthesizing, digesting the disparate dialogue. One of the things I've always loved about Elisse, which I first discovered that day, is that you can watch her think. You can watch her think. I became captivated watching Elisse's incredibly expressive face and body language at the Quebec City meeting, alternating between brow furrowed in contemplation and then eyes widening in moments of great cerebral breakthroughs, mouth scrunched and head cocked slightly northeast, and then a full body postural shift as she connected conceptual dots. To be fair to Elisse, I'm a physiotherapist, trained in watching bodies. But still, the theater that played out on Elise's face that day was marvelous. And by day 2 of the meeting, it had dawned on me that Elisse was the brains behind this operation. That Elisse was going to make this crazy scheme work. Fast forward a few months. Picture this. I'm on a teleconference with Elisse, probably Steve, and a handful of folks from the Quebec meeting. We've been charged with laying the foundation for the new organization that would see through this ambitious mandate. I'm sitting on my bed at home in pajamas, as one did before the advent of Skype with video. We've somehow reached consensus that this fledgling organization will be called the Canadian Working Group on HIV and Rehabilitation. Catchy. The acronym CWGHR. Worse. And so, on the phone, sarcastically, Elisse says, well, CWGHR, or for short, we could call it Quigger. And thus, Quigger was born. In the early years, Quigger was Elisse. Quigger's office was Elise's living room. Quigger's business number was Elise's home phone. 16 years later, Quigger has its own home and a bank of phone extensions. But Quigger's successes still look, sound, and feel like Elisse. Let me tell you about just 4 of the ways that Elisse broke new ground. Number 1. Elisse birthed the concept of episodic disability. The idea that people living with HIV and many others have fluctuations in wellness and illness that are unpredictable over the course of a day, a month, a year, and that this has incredibly important implications for the care they need and the policies that could help make the most of life. Episodic disability. This insight opened up a world of cross-disability action. Elisse leading the way for the HIV field to join forces with new allies in mental health, cancer, and MS, to name a few. 2. Elisse figured out how to make multi-sectoral work. She had a magic touch for bringing together people from different worlds to discover shared interests and to energize as opposed to aggravate each other. A recent example is the launch of Quigger's business case for employing people with episodic disabilities, which was strategically hosted at the office of a private sector ally down in the financial district. 3. Elisse figured out how Quigger could be a catalyst for major change. Quigger, the little organization that could. A classic example is the intractable issue of inaccess to rehabilitation. The evidence is in on the value of rehab for not only people living with HIV, but anyone whose participation in life has been limited by a health condition. And yet free public access to rehab is scarce, and it's on the decline. The right to rehabilitation is being turned into a luxury, affordable only to those with the means to pay. This upsets many of us, but none more so than Elisse, who felt this inequity to the core, not for herself, but for the scores of people being excluded from services that could help them celebrate a life lived fully. Access to rehabilitation. This issue is far bigger than Quigger or the field of HIV, so Elisse began by looking for others leading this charge, where Quigger could lend its voice. She found widespread enthusiasm for the idea of a collective response, but no leader. The need was profound, but the scope dwarfed Quigger's capacity, so Elisse continued looking. More enthusiasm, no leadership. And so, after a long, reasoned deliberation, Elisse jumped into the ring, became the movement's leader. And to this day, Quigger is driving a nationwide effort to reduce inequities in access to rehabilitation. And number 4, Elisse turned Quigger into a global leader. While Quigger was launched with a Canadian mandate, Elisse's innovations have frequently broken ground, not only in Canada, but internationally. A great example is Quigger's e-module on HIV and rehab, which is a teaching tool designed for Canada, but which is now being adapted for sub-Saharan Africa, which is where 2/3 of the people living with HIV reside. Elisse's work has had global reach, but so has Elisse herself, as exemplified by the heartfelt condolences that have poured in upon the devastating news of Elisse's death. From places like the UK, South Africa, Cameroon, Kenya, and Zambia. And so this is the story of Elisse's many contributions. The story of a true ally who worked in solidarity with people in need in every job she ever had. The story of a woman with a magic touch for collaboration and a sixth sense for seeing synergies. The story of a woman who was the boss, the leader, in almost every professional role she ever held, who, instead of calling herself the president, preferred to describe herself as coordinator. This is the story of a woman, picture this, would be outraged to learn that this talk was titled Elisse's Many Contributions. Elisse's Many Contributions, because ever humble, ever modest, Elisse was allergic to claiming responsibility for her successes. Any of you who have tried to personally congratulate Elisse for one of her many achievements will know that she possesses a superhero-level ability to deflect credit. And yet, her achievements are tremendous. Elisse leaves an extraordinary legacy of social change. And many, many, many lucky souls like us who have been touched by her unforgettable kindness and passion. These are Elisse's many contributions.
First, I just wanted to say that it's wonderful to see everybody here, friends and family, and as I've said a number of times, I've learned a lot about Elisse in these last few months that I simply didn't know, and it's a really wonderful experience to get to know your sister, albeit under circumstances that none of us would have wanted, but we all know her a little bit more. I do, certainly, from having heard from you. So I want to sort of pick up the theme that was just described about gifts. So as we all know, Elisse gave generously of her time, energy, and concern. One of the gifts that I got from her was an introduction to modern music. When my mother was pregnant with Elisse, she bought a guitar with the thought of teaching herself how to play. Needless to say, as her pregnancy progressed, it became increasingly difficult for her to properly position the guitar. And after Elisse was born, there were many other priorities, like sleep. It turns out that Elisse inherited that guitar from my mother and taught herself to play. Now, there was a 9-year age difference between Elisse and me, and by the time I was old enough to appreciate music, Elisse was in grade 13 or leaving for university. However, she had a stereo from my Uncle Gord's store that looked a little bit like the lunar module from the Apollo missions. So you get the picture. This was the early 70s. And while Elisse was out and about, I got a chance to take a tour through her album collection. And what I discovered there introduced me to personal feelings so rich and nuanced, I can't imagine attaining them in any other way. A sample of the archive will give you a sense. First, of course, the Beatles, Twist and Shout. And then, a little later, James Taylor, Sweet Baby James, Cat Stevens, Tea for the Tillerman, and Carole King's Tapestry. For a 10 or 11-year-old, these were revelations. When I grew up, I realized that these albums sowed the seeds for a lifelong love of music, a way to directly access the emotional part of my brain that often seems very hard to reach. Music has been the antidote and balance to rational workaday life. And as an adult, I can now understand and appreciate my father's response to music. He was a very cerebral guy with a cerebral job. But when he sat with his eyes closed in the big armchair in our living room and listened to Glenn Gould play Bach, he was transported. I understand that now because I feel it too. This love of music seems to run through our family because my sister Debbie is a concert-level pianist with a wide classical repertoire, and my daughter Rachel has become an aficionado of music from the 1960s. One of her favorite artists is Phil Ochs, a protest singer who was part of the folk music movement of that time. When Rachel announced at her discovery of this amazing singer at dinner one time, Elise's face lit up, for she too loved Phil Ochs and was delighted that her niece should have spontaneously responded to the music of someone popular 40 years ago. So it seems the gift of music, represented by that original guitar, continues to resonate today and to bring joy to our family through a beauty that transcends words. In this way, like so many of you and others whom Elisse touched, I am the beneficiary of a lasting gift that enriches my life. And I will continue to remember her in those moments when I too am transported through the rhapsody of music.
I would like to honor Elisse by saying a few hopeful words. Mourning is not only a loss, but also a recreation. For example, when I think about Elisse in various ways and from different perspectives, I recreate her in my mind. We are all today engaging in this recreation process. I've written a short poem, very short as a matter of fact, called Recreation. Morning sculpts my day with curves and crevices of mood, melting the clay of long-forgotten memories which used to be written in stone. On a lighter note, Elisse and I had two sisters, had something nobody else could have. We had sisterly secrets, lots and lots of secrets. Elisse told me many times that she thought I was good at diplomacy. I like to think she learned some diplomacy from me. However, I'm good in small groups or on a one-to-one basis with people. She was good with large groups, sometimes with different interests from each other, as has been said before. So as far as I'm concerned, she took diplomacy to a whole other level and made it her own.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Wendy Porch, and I'm the Disability Specialist and Education Coordinator at Quigger. I've been given the daunting task of speaking on behalf of Quigger staff about our leader and founder, Elisse. I'm not sure that I'll find the right words for this because to me, this feels a bit like trying to describe the sun. So how do you find words that are big enough or intense enough or bright enough to describe Elisse? I'm not sure that I'll be able, but I feel quite privileged to be able to try. So I'd like to share some memories that staff have had of Elisse in her element at Quigger. And I'd just like to start by introducing Quigger staff that might be here, both current and past. I've asked staff to share memories with me, so this isn't just from me, it's from all of us. So I know Leanne Dolan is here. Leanne's over here. If you could just put your hand up, that'd be great. Leanne. Melissa Popiel. Melissa, are you here? At the back. Kathy Nasije. Kathy's here somewhere. Tammy Yates. Mana Tang. I'm not sure if Mana joined us. Julie Hurd. Julie's in the back. Jillian Bone. Hi, Jillian. Steve Tattle. Eileen McKee. Hi, Eileen. Jeline Witkowski. Don't know if Jalene's here. And Lisa Battel's here too. So, as I'm sure most of the people in this room know, Elisse worked tirelessly for Quigger. I've thought back and I honestly can't say that I ever actually saw Elisse come into or leave the office. Not once. So, she was always there before I got there, and she was always there until after I left. Day in, day out, and almost always on her trusty bicycle, as we've heard from other folks. If Elisse didn't ride her bicycle in, you would actually be checking the news for reports of an impending storm. So, Elisse could be soft-spoken, I think, as we all know, but I need to tell you, at Quigger, she could be very tough. In her work, she modeled excellence, and she expected excellence from us. She had, as we've heard from other speakers, a real gift for bringing people together. Communities and sectors who thought really that they didn't have anything to contribute to each other found, through Elisse, that they shared common barriers and difficulties and could work together to make important changes. She was intensely focused, detail-oriented, and fiercely intelligent. I had asked staff to share some things with me that they thought Elisse had taught them. And Leanne Dolan said this, and I have to second it, and I think, frankly, anyone who's worked with Elisse would second this. So, one of the things that Elisse has taught us is how to do a funding proposal, and how to redo a funding proposal, and how to redo a funding proposal, and so on. And so I know this is funny and very real for many of us, but it does also really reflect, I think, Elisse's strong commitment to getting it right. I remember one of the funds that we were working on was very helpfully due on December 31st, so New Year's Eve, if you can believe it. We were given very little lead time on this. They're extraordinarily detailed as well. And Elisse, accompanied by Janet, and Janet, did I not include you on our list? Janet is a huge factor at Quigger. Janet's in the back corner. So Janet and Elisse worked tirelessly with a little bit of me and a little bit of Leanne, I think, throughout the holidays in order to get that finished and submitted. And I'm sure that's not a surprise to anybody in this room. I do also remember that that particular fund, when we learned that it was successful, and it was a critical fund for Quigger's success, for Quigger's existence, frankly, staff at PHAC, who had the good news, could not wait to let Elisse know. I think they probably had some kind of drawing of straws, frankly, to determine who got to tell her the good news. And I do remember, and all of us fondly remember, when Elisse received word on the success of that proposal, she literally cried tears of joy. It was, as Janet described it to me, party time in the hallway at Quigger that day, which is where we have all of our best meetings, frankly, is in the hallway. Quigger was not just work for Elisse. Quigger was part of Elisse. And Quigger, as an organization, frankly, would not be where it is today without Elisse's drive, passion, and commitment, period. Elise's commitment to partnership within the episodic disability community, as Stephanie has talked about, is also quite significant. Now, when we hear the term episodic disability reflected back to us at Quigger from various stakeholders, including government and academia, it's very important that we remember that there was a time when that phrase meant nothing to people. It didn't mean anything at all before Elise started talking about this. So although we worked hard, it wasn't always work for us. Elise made sure we'd have fun. I remember being in Washington, D.C. with Leanne and Elise for the International AIDS Conference 2012. Elise and I had noticed a Haagen-Dazs shop on one of our walks around, and you're nodding because you probably know where this is going. So we noticed this Haagen-Dazs shop. And I was pregnant at the time, and Elise kept saying to me, we should go. We should go. I mean, come on, do we have time now? And, you know, we were all so busy. We had multiple presentations, events. We were actually also writing a proposal, the SDPP proposal, at the same time. So when we did have free time, we were in our hotel room. So I didn't think we were ever going to get out for this ice cream. But there we were one evening, giggling, literally giggling, and eating enormous ice creams on the patio at the Haagen-Dazs. And there was time actually found for us to go back, because I don't know if you know this, but Elise prefers soft serve, and she didn't order that initially, so we had to go back and try the soft serve too. Elise made sure that our birthdays, new staff, departing staff, holidays, everything was celebrated. And inevitably our parties were stocked by Pusateri's, which is a very fancy shop just down the road from Quigger. But really, if you wanted to make Elise happy, you just had to bring a bag of Skittles. She would, as Tammy Yates put to me, beam with childlike joy whenever there were treats around. She loved Skittles, and she would literally complain about them being there with a big smile on her face while she ate the entire bag. So in planning for this memorial, I had a very hard time finding pictures of Elise. She was never one to take the spotlight, as we've heard, but she did encourage staff and mentor staff to let them find their feet and take on big roles. Elise was interviewed about Quigger for the 15th anniversary celebrations and was asked to sum up Quigger in 15 words or less. She said, hope, affirmation, encouragement, partnership, collaboration, and shared expertise. I'd like to add to that list and say it again. Compassion, hope, affirmation, encouragement, partnership, collaboration, and shared expertise. These are the qualities that Elise embodied. We miss you very much, Elise. We want you to know that your spirit will live on through the work that we do, and we will do our best to honor your memory through bringing people together to challenge barriers, embody compassion, and through driving commitment. And we thank you for being both our leader and our friend.
Everybody seems so calm, and I am so nervous. However, I met Elise about 40 years ago when we were both nearing completion of our undergraduate degrees at Queen's University in Kingston. So I have many, many, many memories of times together. We traveled together, we lived together, worked together briefly in literacy, and shared many, many, many brunches together. One memory, however, recurs. We were both living in Kingston, having stayed on with a group of friends after we graduated. Elise and I went to a small fair complete with rides. We decided to go on the Ferris wheel, and as I'm sure you all know, it's necessary on such a ride to stop at the top in order that riders at the bottom can embark and disembark. It was while we were stopped at the top, hanging in midair, that the two of us clung to each other and screamed to a God neither of us were convinced existed to please get us back to the ground and we would be good for the rest of our lives. Well, needless to say, we made it back down, walked away from the fair, and abandoned our promise. However, when I reflect further, I know that Elisse did not walk away from this commitment. She lived life authentically, with integrity, and with tremendous kindness and compassion. And she lived life passionately, committed to fighting for social justice. Elisse did so with a wonderful laugh, a great sense of humor, and an ability to make fun of herself. In January, standing in the atrium at Princess Margaret Hospital, we found ourselves discussing the plot of some ridiculous made-for-TV Christmas movie we discovered we had both watched in an effort to distract ourselves from what was really going on. Suddenly, Elisse burst out laughing as she realized the absurdity of what we were doing and how incredibly seriously we were talking. If I take a moment, I can hear Elise's wonderful laugh echoing through the hospital. Elisse started her career teaching high school. It was during this time that she and I lived in a house together with a number of our friends. I remember Elisse returning home one night after an exhausting day of teaching, and she questioned whether or not she was on the right path. She told a story of her students playing hangman, a game in which you try to figure out a particular word, and for each letter guessed incorrectly, you draw a body part, starting with the head, body, arms, and so it goes. It was when a student came up and added a penis to the character that Elisse started giggling, and she wasn't sure she could stop. She knew that discipline was in order, but she didn't know if that was where she wanted to place her energies. It might have been later that evening when she applied to OISE to do a master's degree in adult education. Elisse was a deeply generous person. She gave of her time, babysitting my daughters when they were young. She gave of her wisdom, both through her work and through countless discussions, be they political, ethical, or just what was happening in our lives at the time. She gave of her appreciation. Elisse was kind and sweet until the end, never hesitating to express her gratitude for ice cream, popsicles, and the presence of nurses, friends, and family. And there has never been a time in my life when I didn't know I could call in distress and she would be there for me. And not just in that moment of a phone call or a visit, but checking in with me over the days that followed, making sure I was okay. We all know Elisse was dedicated to her work. She was also dedicated to her community. Elisse was never too busy to answer the call of a friend in need. And in that way, I suppose, we never did get off that Ferris wheel. We knew we could continue to cling to one another through life. If I could just take an impromptu moment to say, Elisse could not have lived her life or gone through her death without her family, who includes Ross McKean and Mark Merriweather, who were her true soulmates through life.
On behalf of Dr. Gregory Taylor, Deputy Chief Public Health Officer of PHAC, the Public Health Agency of Canada, I'm going to read this message. The recent announcement of the passing of Elisse brought great sadness to many staff at the Public Health Agency who collaborated with her and watched her career over many years. Elisse's passion for her work was evident to all those who knew her, personally and those who saw her in action. She worked tirelessly to enhance the well-being of those personally affected by the HIV epidemic and other chronic conditions. Elisse had a flawless ease with which she developed partnerships and collaboration, nationally and internationally, with community-based organizations, academia, and government. The growth of Quigger under Elisse was a result of her visionary leadership and her fearlessness in challenging us to move the field forward. Elisse was an inspiration to us all, and her legacy will continue to motivate us for many years to come. On behalf of the Public Health Agency of Canada, we extend our deepest condolences to her family and friends, and our gratitude for her contributions to protecting and enhancing the health and well-being of all Canadians. Thank you.
Hard to deliver these remarks after so many people have spoken, so I apologize in advance for the cry face. So my name is Janet Butler, and I'm the Director of Communications at the Canadian HIV/AIDS Legal Network. I had the pleasure and privilege of working with Elisse at our shared office for a number of years, and also worked directly with her on a number of Quigger projects. While I've been asked to deliver remarks on behalf of Richard Elliott, my colleague and the Executive Director of the Legal Network, a close friend of Elisse's as well, I'd like to first take the opportunity to say how much I personally miss Elisse. That's the beauty of being given a mic when it's not actually yours. I get to say this. Her support and friendship were unwavering. I am very fortunate, as I know a lot of us are, to have known and loved such a beautiful person. So now, on behalf of Richard Elliott, friends, family, loved ones, and others who knew Elisse, I regret that other commitments mean I cannot be with you on this particular day to remember and honor Elisse, someone whom I had the great privilege of calling a good friend and wonderful colleague for the last decade. I am grateful, however, that my coworker Janet is able to share this message with you, and on my behalf and on behalf of the former executive directors of the Legal Network, Ralph Juergens and Joanne Shetta, both of whom have also had the pleasure of knowing and working with Elisse. I'm also delighted that Joanne, who I know is here today, has come to celebrate Elisse's life. Both of them have asked me to include their reflections along with my remarks. Ralph has asked me to share with you the following thoughts. I always enjoyed working with Elisse and will miss her very much. Elisse was one of those rare people who was totally committed to their cause and incredibly skilled at advancing it, while always supportive of other causes, full of empathy, a good listener, a true activist, and a friend. Joanne has shared the following observations. I was honored to have worked with Elisse and to have been inspired by her dedication and compassion. I recall that during my years at the Legal Network, often Elisse and I were the only people in the office on the weekend, and it was always great to have someone around who was so consistently sympathetic and caring. I really enjoyed working with her. She was truly dedicated to the well-being of people living with HIV, and her openness and genuine commitment to collaboration was reflected in how she built an organization that sought consistently to advance this goal above all else. I'm sorry she's no longer with us. Her passing is a terrible loss to many who struggle for human rights in Canada and around the world, and her generous and intelligent leadership will be greatly missed. I share Joanne's sentiments and Ralph's in their entirety, and would also like to add a few of my own thoughts. I recall clearly the day several months ago when Elisse and I got together so she could fill me in on what had prompted her immediate departure from Quigger. We had talked before about her ongoing health challenges, which had added to what had already been a very stressful and difficult year for her.
I suspected what the news might be and was not surprised when she told me. Nonetheless, it still came as a blow to hear it confirmed, and then to also learn that little could be done except perhaps to buy some time. As the conversation progressed, she spoke of how terrifying she found the prospect of what lay ahead, as you can imagine, and it was also clear how grateful and encouraged she was to have a life rich with friendship, despite her privacy about this personal struggle. She compared the situation to the experience of those living with and dying of AIDS in the early days of the epidemic, where there was little in the way of effective treatment, and such support took on even greater importance. I want to offer heartfelt thanks to those who were there with her to help ease any fear and pain. At the time of that meeting, she was still quite physically able. Indeed, as we left the cafe where we'd met, despite the winter weather, she got on her bike to ride home. I loved that small moment amidst the sadness of what she had just shared. It was so Elisse. It was like all the other times we got together at the end of a day to grab a beer and gab away over a shared platter of nachos, and sometimes a second platter, I confess. Those were opportunities to share our anxieties about work and give each other advice, but also always to have a good laugh. In thinking about these get-togethers, what comes to mind is an observation by the poet May Sardin, to which my partner first introduced me years ago. Each day, and the living of it, has to be a conscious creation in which discipline and order are relieved with some play and pure foolishness. That's a tall order, but it's something to which we should aspire. I'm grateful that I got to do that on numerous occasions with Elisse. Then, at the end of our evenings, rain or snow or shine, she'd be headed home on her bike. I always worried about her on those days. The roads were particularly slick, but she was determined, and off she'd go, all bundled up. In the months since her diagnosis, Elisse and I got together a few more times as her health permitted. I remember one glorious sunny Sunday morning this past spring. After several hours of chatting away over the umpteenth cup of coffee, she remarked on how good it was to be out in the morning sunshine, talking and thinking about something other than her own disease and death. I'll remember her face in that moment forever. It brings tears, but also a big smile. In the 3 weeks before she died, I visited Elisse for a few hours one beautiful summer evening at the hospice, as the sun was setting across the valley and filling her room with a golden light. We knew it would almost certainly be our last visit and time to say goodbye. She spoke again of how frightening it all was, but also of the love and care she'd been receiving, including from the staff there. This time, she also alluded to the relief that would come when it was over. By that point, it was becoming increasingly difficult for her to concentrate, and our conversation wandered. But for both our sakes, I wanted our last visit together to include some acknowledgement of all her many contributions. This, it seems to me, is even more important to talk about with the people we love while we still can, before we lose them. So I asked her what she was proud of accomplishing. Not surprisingly, given that she poured her heart and soul into it, she talked about Quigger's achievements in bringing together community members, providers, and researchers from many different fields to improve the care and support received by people living with HIV. This commitment to collaboration across disciplines, which a lot of people have remarked upon, was indeed at the center of everything she did in building up Quigger, and she had a right to be proud of what she achieved through her diligence. But of course she was proud in her modest, unassuming way. This was who Elisse was, and so it's no surprise that this facet of her comes up again and again in all the tributes to her I've seen and heard from other friends and colleagues. It's painful to confront the reality that she isn't with us anymore. Yet the pain reminds us also about what we cherished about her. I hope that Elisse's dignity, generosity of spirit, and kindness will be good reminders to me always to try to emulate those qualities of hers, even amidst all the things in life that can, and often rightfully should, provoke anger, frustration, and sadness. This would be the best way for me to honor her as a friend and a colleague. With gratitude for having known Elisse, Richard Elliott.
Elisse and her family were members of my congregation, and when she was born, I was asked to name her. A rather typical ceremony in Jewish life. And I suggested the name Elisse, from the Hebrew Elisa, which means happy or joyous. I'm not sure Elisse was a joyous person. Perhaps that was not the best designation. Perhaps that was not the best choice. Many other names perhaps would have suited her more adequately. Perhaps the Hebrew word Rahmanut, which means compassion. Elisse incarnated, I think, the attribute of compassion. Incidentally, the Hebrew word Rahmanut comes from the root rechem, which means the womb. Isn't that interesting? Compassion flowing from the womb, a feminine attribute perhaps, a feminine quality, compassion. I visited Elisse during the last few days when she was passing from life. And one day she said to her mother, to whom I'm very close, and that is my relationship through the years with the family, my relationship with Lillian, close and intimate. She said, I'm afraid. And I've been thinking about that. I've been stirred by that. I'm concerned with the two words, I'm afraid. Because, you know, I'm afraid. And if you were to tell me, you know, about your life, your feelings, you would tell me you're also afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that our life must end, you know. What a terrible paradox. We want to enjoy life and live life fully and give meaning to life. We want to incarnate life. We're afraid. There's irony here, isn't there? Life and death. And we give meaning to our lives most fully and completely and adequately when we think of death because we want to live and give meaning to life. So I'm afraid takes on a new meaning. It becomes the opposite, if you will, the cognate form of life and death, and they give meaning to each other. Elisse was a singular person. This has been indicated here. That's why you've all come out. She's touched your lives. Quiet person. I never knew of her manifold achievements. People said she was an enigma, you know, when it came to describing what she did. Rahmanut, compassion. Finally, there is an old Jewish tradition. When you come back from a funeral, the family members gather, and everybody's given a little bit of whiskey. And someone raises the cup and says, my friends, l'chaim, to life. That's what it's all about. And so we're here this morning in great numbers to think in terms of Elisse, because Elisse for us incarnates life and what a life can do for others and what life signifies and what life means ultimately in one's life in terms of rechem, compassion, reaching out. I'm going to ask you to repeat the Hebrew word with me twice. Everybody ready? First softly, l'chaim. And now loud and clear, l'chaim. To life.
To life.
Elisse's legacy.
If I don't come up now and say a couple of words, I know I'm going to chicken out. I'm sitting here wrestling with the irony of thinking about Elisse and all the years that we worked together, beginning in the days when I was on the board at the AIDS Committee of Toronto. My name is Ron Roseness. I've also been working in the HIV community for many, many years and living with HIV since the beginning of the epidemic, and always struck by the tremendous compassion that Elisse showed me as an individual, and one that I know that extended to everyone in our community. And back in those early days when I was on the board of the AIDS Committee of Toronto, and I would go into the offices at ACT, that's where I would see where I would see Elisse, and I thought at that time, I think this person actually lives here. I kept looking for a mattress in her office. Anyway, as the years went on, I, in the late 90s, moved on to serve on the board of the Canadian Treatment Action Council, which is one of the other partner organizations working at the national level. We were focused on access to treatment. We were also very much a policy organization, an activist and advocacy group. And Elisse, in her work at Quigger, and us in our work at the Canadian Treatment Action Council, shared many of the same goals in terms of improving the quality of life for people living with HIV, but we also shared many of the same frustrations of trying to do our work effectively, using both public money and a little bit of private money to try to impact policies in ways that would make life better. This is slow work, it's laborious work, it's very Sisyphean. I always felt, and Elisse and I would talk about this, that we were pushing boulders up hills. I'm glad that we heard this morning from the Public Health Agency of Canada. We recognized that while we had our allies among those fine civil servants working in the government at the federal level, that often their political masters were very dead set against having us raise our voices in community to make our suggestions, and they would criticize us for taking public money and criticizing them, and Elisse and I would sit together in rooms along with our other national partners who are in the room today as well, and say, no, we are your constructive partners in making life better for Canadians living with chronic and episodic disabilities. I did not get a chance to say goodbye to Elisse, but I think she would be very happy to know that in the last couple of years since I have retired from the Canadian Treatment Action Council, that I have been doing some work with Quigger, because Quigger was one of the first organizations, and again I attribute this to Elisse and to her foresight, to pick up on the fact that people aging with HIV were facing some very unexpected challenges, and we've been doing some great work together. So Elisse, I want you to know that, and I think you would be incredibly proud of the way we collaborated over the years, the way we continue to collaborate, the way our paths continue to cross, the way our work continues to cross-pollinate, and I know that you would be proud of the state in which you left Quigger, and the fact that we are continuing to do good and important work, and we're going to miss you. And there's a lot of love in this room, Elisse, and I'm afraid it's a bit like that roller coaster and being up there and hoping to get back down. And I'm afraid we're on our own, Elisse, but we love you.
I'm David Anderson, and I'm going to read an email from my brother Jim, who's in Paris. Please bring my presents with you to the memorial for Elisse Saturday morning. As you may know, I got to first know Elisse in Kingston one summer while working with Pete to paint houses. Then later I lived in the house on Alberta Avenue with Elisse and Anne and Janie and Janice. Then later, Elisse and I did a lot of things together, like movies, theater, music concerts, and cross-country skiing and cycling. And of course, Elisse came often to the Funnel events. The Funnel was an experimental film theater. We had many wonderful talks together, both serious and just goofing around, and many times she helped me through difficult times. You have a special place in my heart, Elisse, and I know that God does as well. Goodbye for now, Elisse, and thanks for all your love, Jim.
Hi everybody, my name's Lori Edmondson. I'm the executive director of Katie, which is another agency similar to Elisse's. And there are sort of 10 of us, and we would call ourselves, or we were called by PHAC, by the funders, the national partners. So I just want to make a couple of comments to add to what people have said, especially for family who didn't know Elisse in her leadership role nationally. Elisse was, many of us are sad that we didn't have an opportunity to say goodbye to Elisse, that we didn't have an opportunity to tell her directly how much she meant to us and how wonderful she was to work with. But really, it's when I think about it, it's really very congruent with who Elisse was. Elisse was in the background. Elisse did the hard work and stood behind the people who were getting the awards, getting the acknowledgements, having the limelight. But Elisse was the person who made it all happen. And we've heard a lot about how that was the case, how she founded Quigger, how she was always facilitating and supporting other people do their work and moving the work forward. She was an incredible team player. You could always rely on her. She was always there. We've heard about how she was at work all the time, and when she wasn't at work, she was checking her emails and she was responding. And if you needed her, like Anne, on a personal level or at work through a work crisis, she was always there, always there for all of us. I think we've also heard about her integrity, and that was, really is really to be fully acknowledged. One of the things that you never heard Elisse talk ill of anyone. I think maybe over some of those beers and tacos, there was some complaining about the funders, about the government, behind the bureaucrats and some of that, but she never spoke ill of anyone. And I think we all also know that no one ever spoke ill of Elisse, because there was nothing to speak ill of.
I'm Mel McNutt, I'm the chair of the Canadian Aid Society. I know you're hearing a lot about the national partners, the national groups, but I just want to sort of say a few things about Elisse. I mean, the room would light up when Elisse came in. That was her special, above and beyond all the work that she did, and she was definitely a champion for people living with HIV and people living with other illnesses. But the room would just light up with Elisse. And Elisse always had something beautiful to say to everyone. And, life has to go on. We come into this world and we leave this world. But what we can take away from this is that all those special memories. So I just sort of reach out to family here and the extended family here. Never forget those memories, never forget those moments that you shared with Elisse, because they're in your heart. They'll be with you forever. And we're going to go away from here today always keeping a piece of Elisse with us, and we'll never forget all the hard work that she did and all the love and support she showed all of us.
Good morning. My name is Greg Robinson. I've known Elisse since the early days of AIDS. When she first started in HIV, she was working on tuberculosis, and I was just reaching the end of my public health training. She was incredibly kind and gracious, but the skill I leave with that she taught me was that Elisse could listen. She could stay with you and be present in moments of sorrow and in joy, and her face always brought a great big smile to others when it lit up just like a sunflower. Thank you, Elisse.
Hi, I'm Sharon Hill, a friend of Elise's, and I just thought I would let you know that it just occurred to me that I take great comfort in this, but Elise's ashes are in a cemetery just down on Winchester Street, and she and I took a couple of walks there over the years, and because it was a place she really loved. And she said, oh, we don't find this too ghoulish, but I just love it here. It's so peaceful, and it's, it was so natural and stuff, and we both just loved it. So I just thought I would mention that it's a beautiful place, and if you ever want to just go and either feel close to her or just enjoy a really nice walk and remember her, that's where she is, and it's a great spot.
There's very little a mother can say when so many beautiful things have been said about her daughter. I love and am proud of all my children. I think that I've really been blessed when I think about the wonderful things that Elisse has done, and especially the fact that she did it without a great deal of what this world considers gratitude, reward. When my children were young, they were gifted. They were born right. And I remember my husband and I both saying to them, the fact that you were born right is a gift. What you do with it will show us what kind of people you are. And they've all done it. I'm going to miss Elisse terribly. But I'm very proud and grateful to her for having been the kind of person she was. And I want to thank all of you for realizing what a great person she was. And thank you for being her friends. There are two people I do want to mention. One is named Ross McKean, and the other is named Mark Merrifield. They were friends, the likes of which I don't know have existed in many places in the world. But they truly were friends in everything that that word means. And I'm grateful for them for having been to Elisse almost as good as any family could ever have been. Again, thank you all for doing this. And I hope you remember her as I do. Joyous, smiling, full of life, and just full. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm David Salter. I'm one of the two co-chairs of QIGR, and I'm proud and honored to serve in that capacity. I'd also like to say thank you very much for those words. Echoing Steve's welcome, and on behalf of the board, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for coming, including members of Elise's family, colleagues and friends, and the Quigger staff and others who've organized such a gracious and warming celebration of Elise's life. I met Elise 8 years ago at the wedding of my best friend. He had been telling me about this small and incredibly dynamic organization doing work on improving the lives of people with HIV and AIDS and other episodic disabilities, and the amazing woman who was leading this organization. He arranged to have a sit together at his wedding. Elise was so compelling and so compassionate and so passionate when speaking about Quigger's work. And when I was asked to join the board of directors, I didn't hesitate. This was one of the smartest decisions I've ever made in my life. It made me incredibly lucky, not only because it allowed me to become engaged in the important work of Quigger, but it also allowed me to work alongside Elise for the years that I did. Elise never failed to inspire me with her enthusiasm, her dedication, her passion, her compassion and commitment. I don't know how many adjectives there are in the English language to describe these things, really. Her commitment to the work she felt so strongly about was incredible. But more importantly, her sense of service and always putting other people ahead of herself was literally awe-inspiring to me. She was also relentless and impossible to deny. And she also gave me the gift of rekindling my own commitment and belief in the power and possibility of change to improve people's lives. We laughed a lot together, and I must admit I found it impossible not to tease her, especially after she'd apologized for the 4th time in a 10-minute conversation. But given that I met Elise at a celebration of life and love, I'm deeply, deeply, deeply thankful to say goodbye to Elise in a similar fashion and at a similar celebration. A tribute to her and her life, and surrounded by those who loved her and those whose lives she touched. She became my friend, and I will miss her presence in my life. And if I could be granted only 2 wishes, the first would be that Elise was still with us. Barring that, the second would be that I had met her much earlier in my own life, to have had that much more time with her in my life. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Glenn Townsend. I'm the other co-chair, and it is great to see everyone here today. This is a difficult time for everyone. I met Elise in probably about 2002, and we had a wonderful journey together. She was an amazing person. And I think, one of the amazing things was she liked her bicycle, and when we met, I was always on my bike too. So there was those common threads that came through. Elise was incredibly humble, and that's a quality that we don't see very much today. Everyone wants to be in the spotlight. And I think that was another quality that I really enjoyed about Elise, because she understated everything that she did. And she did not want to take credit for all of her work. It was always the other people in the group that got the acknowledgement. That's been mentioned by the staff. And you know, I have to say, Elisse was amazing at bringing people together. We have the most amazing staff at Quigger and the most amazing partners. And that is due a lot to Elisse's ability to bring people together. You know, 100 years would not be enough time to spend with Elisse. And you know, life is unfortunately the way it is. We come, we leave. But it is people like Elisse that make the journey worth being here. Excuse me. At the time I met Elisse, I was at a crossroads in my life. I also was very early on in the epidemic, and I'm living with HIV. And when I heard of her work, one of my friends and also colleagues at What's Now Positive Living said to me, "You need to meet this woman. You really need to meet this woman. She has really great ideas." And that's how the journey actually started for me. And, you know, there'd never be enough. But I am so grateful that I had Elisse in my life for the time I did. She's left an amazing legacy. And she's touched so many people and will continue to. As been said so many times over and over again, what she created and what she was able to manifest was truly, truly amazing and life-changing for so many people. And there's almost no way to ever repay that back. Our board talked recently and about having some kind of acknowledgement for Elisse that will last a little bit longer. And many of you who are familiar with Quigger know that over the last few years we have had an award for excellence in HIV and rehab. Excuse me. As a very small token on behalf of Quigger, I'd like to announce that in the future we will be renaming the award after Elisse. And again, I'm so grateful that everyone was here, and thank you for the family and all the people that helped support her. You would think after 3 decades of going through similar things with so many people, Elisse, you will be missed, but we will not forget you.
Everything to you. You say you want to start something new, and it's breaking my heart you're leaving. Maybe I'm grieving, but if you want to leave, take good care. Hope you have a lot of nice things to wear, but then a lot of nice things turn bad out there. Oh baby, baby, it's a wild hard to get by just upon a smile. Oh baby, baby, it's a wild world, and I'll always remember you. like a child girl.